MSNBC's White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is traveling with the president and joins us from Maine.
Good afternoon, Al. We are just receiving 2 pages of the statement by the president. Literally, it was printed from his junior staffers who are here, a complete surprise here in Kennebunkport. The president lays out in great detail his reasoning in the Scooter Libby case. As you know, Scooter Libby was not only the chief of staff and national security advisor to the vice president, he was assistant to President Bush. And in the lengthy explanation, the president says this: I respect the jury's verdict, but I have concluded that the prison sentence given to Mr. Libby is excessive. It's 30 months, as you know. Therefore, I am commuting the portion of Mr. Libby's sentence that requires him to spend 30 months in prison. My decision to commute his prison sentence leaves in place harsh punishment for Mr. Libby. That's the $250,000 fine. The reputation he gained through his years of public service and professional work in the legal community is forever damaged. As a felony conviction, he would lose his law license. He will remain on probation. The significant fines imposed by the judge will remain in effect. And he goes on to say, the Constitution gives the president the power of clemency to be used when he deems it to be warranted. It is my judgment, that of President Bush, that a commutation of the prison term in Mr. Libby's case is an appropriate exercise of this power. So the president is doing something short of a pardon, which would wipe the slate clean, take away the convictions. And in this case, he is sparing Libby from jail time, but he remains a convicted felon. As I mentioned, will likely lose his law license, will have to pay $250,000 in fines that were deemed by the court, and he will continue to be on probation. Politically, this allows the president to split the difference. A full pardon could have been viewed by critics as really allowing someone who worked for the president to be above the law. At the same time, many conservatives were pressuring the president to take some sort of action. And when today the appeals court said that Libby's prison time could not be stayed while he appealed, the president decided to take this action. It is a 2-page statement from President Bush, clearly laying out the criticism, his consideration of what happened, and this dramatic step that he's taking today. Reverend Al?
Kelly, so in effect, the president is maybe attempting, in whatever way we might say clumsily, to have it both ways. He's not letting Libby all the way off the hook, because he is going to uphold the conviction in terms of him being a felon and the fine, but he will not do jail time. Is that the bottom line of these 2 pages?
That's my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, but I did cover every minute of the Lewis Scooter Libby trial and became familiar with all of the events and issues that were at stake. He talks in this report, his 2-page statement, about the importance of telling the truth, and that he had instructed, the president had, all of his staffers to cooperate. He also explains that he believes that the sentence was excessive, that 30 months for a first-time offender was simply too much in his judgment. And we don't talk often about the power of a president to commute a sentence. We think more often about pardons, and the president, like presidents before him, has granted pardons. I believe Mr. Bush is up to about 113. Usually, though, what he requires is that someone would have already served their sentence, shown remorse, and it's a long process to get to the pardon at a presidential level. This short-circuits all of that.
Have we ever seen Mr. Libby show any remorse here? Hasn't he been, frankly, fighting this all the way down? I mean, you're not dealing with someone who has expressed a lot of remorse here. And second, Kelly, while I have you, is how do you explain the secret nature of how this unraveled? You were traveling with him, members of the media. You had no clue at all this was coming. I mean, what is the politics behind that?
Well, we have been talking since the conviction took place to the most senior officials who would be a part of the process of consideration. How would the president think about this? What factors would he use? And repeatedly, the most close and trusted advisors to the president simply said that they couldn't shed light on this issue. They couldn't walk us into the thinking of the president because it is so politically volatile. And it is a type of power the president has that is something that ultimately he's got to decide on his own. So we were not given any heads up. The real timing has to do with the action by the U.S. Appeals Court, which would compel Libby to show up as soon as the Federal Bureau of Prisons set his time for reporting. He had hoped hoped that the appeals process could unfold and he'd be able to stay free. When you mention remorse, he has not publicly stated it, in part because he's been constrained by his own attorneys. Libby himself is a lawyer, and in trying to fight this case, of course, he pleaded innocent during the trial, and then in subsequent papers tried to appeal the decision and maintained his innocence. This does not require him to apologize or to say he was wrong. It gives the president, as you indicated, a way to sort of find a middle ground that politically may be more sellable, because critics will say Libby is still getting a tough punishment in that he must pay a $250,000 fine and will remain a convicted felon. And for critics who believe that the president should have completely pardoned him, this is something they can point to show that the president believed, as many who are conservatives feel, that this prosecution should not have taken place. One of the points the president makes is that Libby and no one else was ever charged with the underlying crime in the CIA leak investigation, revealing the classified status of a covert agent. What he is charged with and was convicted of is perjury and false statements to the FBI. Serious crimes, according to the U.S. counsel, but in the view of many critics, they felt it was criminalizing politics. There's a lot to be said about all of this, but it was a surprise. The timing really triggered by the action at the court level, and the president has already left Kennebunkport, flying on Air Force One. We stayed behind to wrap up our reporting on the Putin meetings, and then this bulletin came through.